This AI thing is ubiquitous across the industry where everybody is chasing AI features. And a lot of people who don't understand how AI works, expecting AI to be like a magic wand.
But we have an enemy at the game today. We have a product manager, a product director, a product owner. I feel the urge to bite. First, I'm sorry. Another thing is the word that probably all of us users hate the most is the roadmap. Like it really is a trigger for us because usually we're hearing it in the sense of a promise that rarely materializes into something. And this is the moment when I flip so hard and I literally want to throw some stuff off the table. It does happen.
So you have to go ahead and trust it up front. And then if it gets it wrong, you can say, you're a piece of shit, I don't like you, and I'm not going to use you. But if they get it right, then it earns your trust.
Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to Alabama, a place that I've never been, dying to go. And I'm hoping that I'm going to get a good host if I ever make my way there. But we have an enemy at the gate today. I'm sorry. We have a product manager, a product director, a product owner, basically the person that makes decisions for our lives to be happy or very miserable. So I'm quite excited to introduce you to Rich. And Rich, I'm going to hand over to you to ask you to get a little bit more info on your background. But before that, how are you doing? Are you ready for this conversation?
We're good.
Let's see. Okay, let's see. So shoot.
Okay, so, well, I'm not as much of the enemy at the gates as you might think. I actually started working in call centers. So I was an agent on the phones.
So you used to be a friend and then you basically betrayed us. That's what you're saying right now.
No. I listen, I've worked on a lot of work with people on the ground, trying to help them as best I possibly could. So I worked initially for Philips and IBM doing tech support, just taking general customer service calls. I worked for Nokia doing the same thing and doing tech support. And then I did tech support for LG Electronics for all their TVs. And I've experienced what it's like to sit down and have to take calls from people who are not happy and in ways that you can't do anything about. I mean, all these big companies have policies, and a person sitting on the phone is just most of the time stuck with doing whatever they say you have to do. And I've been through that. So there's a lot of that that's not unfamiliar to me. But after that, I did move into the product management side. But before I got to product management, I helped in implementation. So I started at Monet Software, where we were an itty bitty little WFM company. We were the first to go like true SaaS into the cloud. I started there in 2007. And I worked in like implementation. So I in customer success for many years. So I helped people actually set it up and get it working, went through all their environments, made sure that things would work. And for the most part, it did. Monet was was like an SMB focused tool. It wasn't an enterprise level tool. So we did things that were a little bit different than the really large vendors would. I stayed there until 2019. And I'd done product management. I was the senior product person, product manager for several years there. After a while, we got acquired by Verint in 2019. And then I moved into Verint and took over their enterprise WFM tool. And then eventually became director and had a team of product managers doing the WFM under me. I did the business side for Verint. I didn't do the agent side as much. So they kind of separated things into business side and agent side. And I owned the business side. So the forecasting, scheduling, intraday real-time management, all of that stuff was what I owned.
So all the things that my side of the fence is interested in, right? The friends.
You're interested in all of it, like PTO request and shift swap and shift bidding and all of that stuff, because you have to manage it. That's not the part that I own. I had done all that previously too, because I did it with Monet, but it was kind of a bigger At Verint, things are huge compared to little old Monet. So that's
I'm ready to shoot in your direction because you know what? I'm gonna make you uncomfortable for the sole reason that I'm gonna address to you all the questions that they wanna address to all of the product managers out there, and unfortunately, you're gonna be replying on most of
Yep.
them.
Right. Yeah, you're fine. You got me here. So
Okay. So one thing that user community and us down on the ground wanting to know is give me a little bit more information. What does a product manager, product owner do? Like, what is it your job?
okay, so generally speaking, in software, product owner isn't as much a role. I'll kind of distinguish these things out. Product owner isn't as much a role, but maybe it's a role, but it's not like a title usually.
Mhm.
Owner is like a role or a task that you do with a dev team. So when you say that I'm going to own this portion of the product, that product owner is usually the person that is sitting down and writing out Jira stories, and saying, hey, the product's got to do this. And here's all the acceptance criteria. If they click here, then it does this. If they click here, it does that. That a product owner is a lot more tactical. They're sitting there working with the dev teams. They're going to stand ups, and if you're familiar with Agile, you're going to do Scrum. You're going to do stand ups. You're going to be doing your back and forwards. You're going to be doing your retros. That's what your product owner is doing. Now, your product owner can also be product manager. Product manager is a little more strategic. So, a product manager will be doing things generally like trying to rank the features in terms of priority about what we're going to do. We'll be doing user feedback and research and all of this stuff. And we'll be planning and grooming the roadmap for what needs to be done in the future. Um, I say that, but you need to understand that as much as people will say, oh, you're the owner, you're the product manager, a lot of this stuff is decided way up the chain. We don't get a lot of input, and we're just taking it and doing it. We're basically just taking the marching orders and doing them. We do have input on things when we can push back and we can do it, but a lot of that is decided at a higher level by company strategy. So when you look at what's happening now with a lot of these companies, are like, it's all AI, it's all AI. What'll happen is you'll get somebody up at the top that says, look, I don't really care about all these little features that your users are asking for. What we want is a new AI feature that we can get out of market. And then we're on the hook for figuring out what is the new AI feature that we're going to do that we can actually put on the roadmap and put out to get in front of all of these different conferences and things like Gartner and all of the different awards that people like to buy themselves to say we were the most excellent AI company in the world and all those. So that's kind of what happens. You do need to understand that it's not just us going, oh, I like this feature, or I like that feature, we should do that. There's a lot that comes from above us. And it is a committee decision too. We have to work with go-to-market, and we work with the sales teams, and we work with the marketing strategy and all the people that will have a say in what should actually get done. So
I feel the urge to bite laughing
Thanks.
hard. I'm sorry. You know what? I've been a part of a product team, and luckily for me, I was mostly the person doing the decision. Okay, this is what we need to prioritize. This is what we need to develop first, and do that ranking that you're mentioning. Very rarely, I was how do I put it? Somebody from higher up told me, "No, no, no, we have something else as priority." And this was in cases when it came down to contracts being stopped, and then we had to prioritize doing something else while we still have something in place. So this was the situation when a user, or me as the person who has that specialty, would have been overruled and would be slapped down and said, "Oh, you know what? But it will be very fancy to make a LinkedIn post and buy ourselves an award so we can potentially attract one more customer that we wouldn't give a shit about." So while I perfectly acknowledge and I understand that product teams are in a very shitty situation, what I'm hearing from you is basically we're doing our best, but most of the time we're getting shit from the users and we're getting shit from upstairs as well.
Yes. I mean, that happens. Now, for sure, we do listen to users, and we like understanding, like I can have sat down and tried to do things in the application and gone, this sucks. Like, I would not want to do this. It's, a gazillion clicks to do something which should be easy. And there is definitely times where we get to move on things like that and prioritize them higher. It's not always, and you mentioned like custom work because one big customer decides they want a particular feature and nobody else will use that feature, but they're going to cut you a $2 million check. So, from a business sense, it's like, why would we, it's hard to say no sometimes. They're going to cut you a big check and you do something. It doesn't really matter how many other people would use it. So certainly I can understand why some of our users might wonder, like, why did you release this feature? It doesn't seem like anybody would use that. Well, a lot of times the answer is somebody paid for it.
Mm. Yeah, no, I understand that part, and it does happen. Custom work do get in the way. The situations that I wanna discuss with you, and that again are basically a trouble for all of us users or a lot of us users out there is, oh my God, I'm getting so frustrated right now, even thinking about it. When something is being rolled out, when a feature is out there or a new functionality, because the development team decided on their own it's going to be massively cool because them as people who have zero workforce management background and are developers decided that it will look cool. So this is the moment when I flip so hard and I literally want to throw some stuff off the table. It does happen. It does happen.
In WFM,
Oh, oh.
I have never, and listen, I'll tell you, I haven't ever been through that. Not for the dev team. The engineering teams take direction from product across the board 100%. The engineering teams don't ever get to go do, not from my experience, not that may happen somewhere else, I don't know. But certainly from my experience, the engineering teams do not get to make those type of decisions.
But it could be that the product managers or that party that's in charge have said, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's going to look very cool. I'm not saying that they themselves have decided, okay, tomorrow we're going to make that entirely different feature that we think it will look cool. Somebody must have given them the direction, right?
Yeah, of course. So it's hard to speak to. I never personally got to go, oh, this will be a cool feature. We'll do this. Everything has a prioritization process where you look at what the potential revenue looks like. What are your customer, like you would need to build business cases for certain type of features to be done and say, look, we've got a list of potential customers that have asked for this. You got a list of sales that were lost directly because of this feature didn't have. You got some that might have been a partial loss because of this feature, and you got some that maybe just asked for it, but you can't really say whether it was a loss. So you look at all of that and you try and tally it up to a dollar amount to say, hey, if we did this feature, there's a very good chance that we'll get X amount of revenue in a given year. So I wasn't party to being able to have this situation where I could just unilaterally go, oh, this would be super cool. Maybe on some really small stuff, but like on like roadmap level, like strategy features, those are driven by a lot more than just any product manager, one product manager sitting around. Even as a director, I had to sit down and we had to argue why we would want to do something or why we would need to do something. And we'd try to generally have to prove it out with other people, vice presidents and other directors and things like that. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I didn't get to just ever make a decision where I was like, hey, we should just do this thing because.
So we're saying that in an environment where the company or the vendor is customer driven, that should not be the case to happen.
No, I would call it market driven, because most of these things are really targeting, portions of the market, but certainly customer feedback impacts the features that, like once you develop a big project, like you have a big project where you're going to launch a big thing that has a ton of features, that's a market strategy type of thing that has to be sorted through. Once you kind of get it out and you're going through MVP and you're going through a controlled release and you're getting feedback from your users about what it looks like and how it works and if it's good or it sucks, then you will get a little bit more say, oh, we really need to do this feature, but it's justified. You got a user who said, okay, this is supposed to make my life easier, and yet I had to click twice as many times to get the thing that I wanted. Then you can use that feedback to help drive why you would do some. But those are like smaller level features. Not they're not like roadmap strategy or vision type of things, right?
I
They're
hope this recording is seen by a lot of vendors out there, some of whom might really use it to fix their operations. And I'm sending you a lot of hugs and virtual kisses right now. So moving on with this one, another thing is, that the word that probably all of us user hates the most is the roadmap. Like it really is a trigger for us because usually we're hearing it in the sense of a promise that rarely materializes into something. And I have personally seen so much time being lost of customers, vendors, interviewing them and asking them, what do you need? How do you need it? Why do you need it? And then every single customer is basically having the same repetitive story. Oh, I need this for this and this reason. And then it's been put on the roadmap. And then somebody much more clever than the people who are actually doing the job on a daily basis comes and say, no. And then we don't even communicate it to the customers anymore.
yeah. So I roadmaps change, and when you hear roadmap, you need to. It's bad practice. I don't know how to say this very easily, but it's bad practice for any software company, WFM or not, to put um, things on a roadmap and put dates on them and make promises that are far out. I don't know if you've seen these, but you'll look and they'll say, "Hey, next 3 quarters from now, we're gonna have X feature," right? And you're like, "Cool." Now I got to wait three. Excuse me, I got to wait 3 quarters, only to find out that at some point they deprioritized it, or it's a lot bigger and it's going to take 3 more quarters. It's really just not good practice to give, to promise those things at that level. They should generally, any software company should be saying it's a target, but we really can't commit to it. Unfortunately, that the way that a lot of these customers work is they go, if you don't commit to it, we're leaving.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so they end up being kind of forced into a corner to say to commit to it. There's probably times where people know for a fact, even though they made the commitment, they just can't deliver on it, and they make it anyway.
Yeah, but it does happen. Let's be honest about it. That's usually the card that vendors are playing, and it's very frustrating. And I do understand. I have worked in a product team, I have led a product team. I know that stuff happens. You're dependent on other products, on other projects, on people leaving, people coming, budget being like there's so many stuff going on. So of course we do have the patience and the realization that you can have that commitment and things will change. It does change for us on a daily basis, like what our tasks are. But usually, when you say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, we're going to put it in the roadmap, and you never hear for this again, it's like, for me, it's so disrespectful towards the customer. Like, it's okay for you to getting the money out of them. It's okay for you to waste their time asking for input, but it's not okay to be decent enough to provide them with the feedback. I mean,
Well, from a customer point of view, I would just say get it in writing. And if you want it to be done, get a commitment out of them, because when we say, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea, we'll throw it in the roadmap," or we'll honestly, I never said, "Hey, that's a great idea, we'll throw it in the roadmap." It was more like, "Hey, that's a great idea, and we'll put it under consideration," because I couldn't necessarily change a roadmap like that, right? So try to be setting expectations. I feel like is very important. Like you want to set the right expectation for people that look. I don't necessarily have this level of control. I can't just go, "Hey, I'm going to steer the entire ship all over here." But I can tell you that we would that we'll review it as part of something that we'll review in prioritization. And if a lot of people ask for it, it is true that it gets a lot more visibility. The more people that ask for a feature, the more likely it is it gets done. It tells the company, that's something people actually need. Um, because you get
that's
folks
my
who
problem. What
don't.
you're, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but you already mentioned that the ranking is also done somehow on an internal basis and it's driven based on marketing position or whoever decided that this feature needs to be released for acquiring another market or whatever, or bigger percentage of customers. But this also can be a feature that will win you those new customers because it will save X amount of hours, and it can be something very stupid, something that will take you not much time to develop or configure in the system, but it's going to be deprioritized because usually, and I dare to say it, existing customers are seen as less valuable than future prospects.
Well, that's just the nature of it. This is the unfortunate reality of corporate business is that as much as they're important, they're always chasing new revenue. New revenue is always going to be the more important bit to look.
How is that more important?
That's how you get your stock price. There's no way around. And listen, it's not like I had to sit there through it a whole bunch, but look, you're always looking for new revenue. It's certainly important to go, hey, we can't lose existing revenue, but I can tell you that's the way things work when you're looking at whether or not we're going to do a feature that we are certain is going to win us new revenue versus a feature that we got customers asking for. Let me tell you that they're not taken lightly. When we look at some of those features, we go, when a big customer goes, hey, I really, really, really want a feature, we'll look and go, okay, well, you just renewed 3 months ago. Your next renewal is 3 years from now.
Mm.
I can put you on ice until 6 months until your next renewal and then do the feature. For now, I can chase all this new revenue. I know that's terrible to hear, but it's the reality of the business that's what they're going to do. We're going to go, oh, well, your renewal's not I don't have to worry about this for like 18, 24 months. And then I can do that feature in 3 or 4 months and get it out to you before you renew so that we can say, look, we did your feature.
And then we're wondering why it takes twice as long currently for new prospects to commit to a certain tool and a vendor, because when they hear the reality of it, like, I would never sign anything in my, I'm going to use pen and paper. That's how scary it is when you're basically saying, we only will care about you to the moment when we see your signature and we start getting your money. After that, we're only going to start caring about you potentially to the moment when we know that we can absolutely lose you.
This is the way it works. That's not unique to,
No,
uh,
it's not.
yeah,
It
yeah.
is. It's
This is just kind of the unfortunate reality of it. Um, that's kind of how it works. I don't know what to say.
yeah. I mean, I'm usually not quiet, but those things are really getting on my ears so bad. And I found.
I had to live from the inside of it for a long time, so it's okay. I mean, certainly it's frustrating from our point of view too, because we know that there's certain things that we really, really should do. We know that our product has gaps and our users tell us,
Mhm.
but we don't have the power to say, well, I'm going to redirect all my development effort to doing this thing that I know we need to do, because the reality is we've already got those customers and they will make do until they can't. And then we can deal with it. But in the meantime, we'll look at, chasing new features and new revenue that will come in. Again, this AI thing is probably ubiquitous across the industry where everybody is chasing AI features. And probably a lot of people who don't understand how AI works are expecting AI to be like a magic wand.
Yes, they do.
They can have it do things that are not like, even if you can have AI do amazing things, which it can do, you still have to tell it what to do. It doesn't
Yeah.
figure it out for you. And I think that there's a lot of people both on the consumer side that are purchasing the software, and the user side, and then some of the leadership side that just sort of expect AI to just magically do things because they don't necessarily understand what it's going to take to make it do something. If you are doing something with AI that has never been done before, you can't just go you can't go read a white paper on how to do it, right? You got to figure out, you have to do the research internally and the development and everything to make it do that thing that nobody else has made it do before. That's a big investment. So as much as AI is the big, cool new thing, I think probably what you'll see from a lot of vendors here is kind of the same old regurgitated AI stuff. It's like Copilot, like Microsoft's like Copilot, like agent helper thing where they're like, yeah, I can just, it's like a large language model that'll look up a bunch of stuff that a person could probably look up. It's a lot faster than maybe a human could do it. They could do research and propose solutions and all sorts of stuff and help them with things like that. But how many different versions of that are you going to see before you see something that's like truly revolutionary? That when it first came out is super cool, but now like everybody's got it. So what's the next big thing that's going to happen? And so that next big thing to happen is going to take some of these companies to put a lot of research and development into doing something that hasn't been done before. And they're very adverse to that. They don't want to spend a bunch of money because there's no guarantee that it'll come out and work.
Yeah, you know, my concerns with that is I'm keep on saying this. I'm a huge fan of automation. I'm a huge fan of AI, and I hate the way that we're marketing AI at the moment because it's simply not true how we're marketing it. But the beauty of my current and past positions is that I get the opportunity to see a lot of WFM tools in action. And I can tell you some of them are mostly a replica of one another with slightly different colors that are used. And you just know that the same people who developed the software A can move out to software B, developed it then. And basically, even the consultants that are rolling out that solution are using the exact same language, the features work in the exact same way. So even I sometimes have hard time if I don't see the colors, I'll be like, oh, this is software A or B or C. And that's my concern with those new AI functionalities that are currently rolled out, that everyone is basically doing the exact same thing, which they assume it's what the customer would need, which is why I'm so frustrated when we are ignoring current customers, because for me, this is ultimately your audience to tell you what they need. This is who works with your product on a daily basis. And they're telling you, it will make me very happy if you develop this. So basically, you have a very good chance that the customer BCD, prospects or BCD, will talk to them and they'll say, okay, they listen to us. This is what I developed. This is how they're saving us time. But no. We have heard AI, and please let me know how does that work? Who is the person that will tell the AI, okay, Rich, please, we want your team to develop this, and it should work in this way? Because for me, this should be a subject matter expert or a specialist in workforce management that can basically give you the framework. This and this and this equals this. This is how we want to work.
So it depends. I mean, this is the same way with any feature, though. It's not necessarily AI, right? That's the way that you would want any feature to be developed. It's not AI necessarily. And it depends. Sometimes you get direction from the very tippy top about what something needs to do and what they expect it to do. And then you just have to develop it. And then there's times where we do serious research with the users to understand what challenge they're experiencing is, and then figure out how to solve it. One of the problems that we run into is that users will prescribe their own features. So they're familiar with how the software works, and then say, here's the feature I want. And you'll go develop it, and they'll be like, oh, but it didn't do the other thing that I needed it to do. And we'll go, you didn't say that. You just said this. We're like, oh, well, I thought this would have just, this just would have made sense to put in there. And from a software development point of view, we're basically going, all right, if you're telling us what to do, then we're just doing that. We're not doing every other peripheral thing that might help with it. We're just doing the thing that you're asking us to do. So one of the better things that companies need to do is not, and you might not agree with this, but I can back it up, which is, you tell us, don't tell me what the feature you want is. Don't tell me how it should work. You tell me what business problem you have, what challenge you're facing. What's the actual thing that you need to get done? What's the outcome you're looking for? And let us figure out how to turn that challenge into a set of features or a feature that gets that done for you the easiest way. That's really the best way to do it, not to have a user prescribe what the feature should be, because a lot of times if users don't understand um, how things work internally, sometimes software is built a certain way where just doing the thing that seems really easy to do is really hard to do, because you have to rip a ton of stuff out and redo it in order to get it to work that way. So it's better to start with the business challenge you're having and the outcome you're looking for, and work our way backwards to say, this is where we're trying to get. Let us figure out features and stuff that'll actually get you there.
No, I'll give you that. And to be fair to every vendor out there, sometimes it might look very simple for us. Oh, just add another button here, and if we click it, it's gonna spit out that result. But yeah, that's coding. It might change the entirety of the software, so it's not so easy as for us end users might look like. So I'll give you that. But the thing is that let's use something specific. For example, forecasts. Currently forecasting the WFM tools. You know, this is a topic that I'm ranting quite a lot about.
Yep.
At the moment, what we have in most softwares is we're loading up or connecting to a telephony system. We're loading up the volumes, the AHT, and it spits out some workload. And on the back of that workload, we calculate what is the staffing requirements that we need, right? And we might manually adjust those volumes. We might adjust that AHT based on our knowledge. And this is basically the extent to which we have a forecast. And of course, we might add some custom events, we might add some impact here and there. But then the problem that we're facing from our daily basis is, okay, but marketing team comes and says that they would need to load 2,000 orders that would reflect in this and that. And there is no way to basically accumulate all of those different business drivers in a good way and to make a very good analysis and what would be the data produced, why, what algorithms are being used, what calculations are being used. So we're basically seeing an end result that we don't necessarily know how it's being built. We know that we disagree with it because we see the deviations then during the end. But that's it. That's how forecasting currently works, with some exceptions. I'll say that, with some exceptions of vendor.
A lot of the vendors that I'm aware of, the standard forecasting for short term is basically weighted averages, right? So that you take a 5-week weighted average and you say, here's what it is, or whatever. You can usually custom select whatever sets of historical data you want to do, but it's basically just a weighted average. So for call centers that have, or contact centers that have a relatively stable environment, averaging can be really accurate. I mean, really accurate. Like, I've done a lot of research into this, and you see some of these folks who are sitting at like a 99+% average, like they're within 1% of their forecasts all the time, because it's stable. For things that are not stable, and something you mentioned specifically, like with your marketing, where you've got an external piece of information that's going to influence what's going to happen in the contact center. There are solutions for that. I have to actually watch what I say at this point, and you can keep this in. There are solutions that are going to be out to help with these type of things. They're going to become more commonplace, because it's not an impossible solution to do. It's going to be up to the vendors to really want to solve these type of problems. So the more noise you make about it, the more it's going to be something that they are going to compete to solve. There are solutions for exactly the type of thing you talked about. Like a multivariate forecasting tool can take into account what has happened historically, and it can know, you can feed it in data, and you can say, historically, here's what happens every time. Here's all our history. I have a year and a half of history. I have a year and a half of these different marketing campaigns that have dropped 2,000, 1,000, 8,000, whatever things that go out. And we know that next week there's going to be one that drops 4,000. So these new tools, like AI, this is where AI can be very useful, that can actually look at all that history and do a analysis of what's happening and provide a forecast that would take that into account. That's not unique to anybody in particular. That is just a thing that can be done with a multivariate forecasting tool. It doesn't necessarily have to be contact centers or whatever.
Mhm.
The and that's a good example of where you know what data is actually going to be useful to do that with. You may not always know what that data is that may help in that same way. You may not all, you just don't know. It's like you got a bunch of, basically you're sitting in contact center, you're sitting on like a gold mine's worth of data that could potentially help you. But you actually know which data is actually going to help. So there are ways to deal with that. Like I said, I can't speak too much to what's going on with that, but I think you're going to see that a lot of these things become more commonplace. The thing that I will tell you, about trying to figure out how you're going to reverse engineer those results,
Mhm.
not. So a lot of these algorithms, a lot of these AI tools, especially some of these neural net forecasting algorithms, NBeats and Neural Profit and things like that, you're not going to be able to reverse engineer how they came up with their numbers. You're the only way you're going to be able to gain confidence. This is a challenge. The only way you'll be able to gain confidence with these tools is to see them get it right. So you have to go ahead and trust it up front. And then if it gets it wrong, you can say, you're a piece of shit. I don't like you and I'm not going to use you. But if they get it right, then it earns your trust, right? This is really the only way. There's no way to promise that there's going to be a guaranteed amount of accuracy increase. So I'm sure everybody wants to hear something like, we can guarantee that you're going to have X amount of accuracy improvement by using a particular forecasting tool, but it's kind of just a misrepresentation of what's going on. You can probably use some of the AI tools that will come out in the next few years for forecasting to really help you address the volatility in a non-stable environment where you do have all these different things happening and everything's changing. You've got async work where you got cases that turn into phone calls, that turn into chats. Some of these tools can really help with that, especially if things are volatile. But it may be that, and you never can unblack box them. It's just it's either gonna work or it doesn't, and you'll just have to, people are just gonna have to figure out whether or not it works for them by trying it out, and then giving feedback to the vendors that you're using their tool and say, well, it didn't work. Here, point. Let me show you where it was bad and potentially why. Weighted averaging may always work out for some of your more stable places, because weighted averaging is still a really successful way to do it. There's a reason why we've been using it for a long time. There's a reason why Erlang worked so well for a really long time till we got to a multi-skilled environment. And then, then now weighted averaging is a good way to pull in a good forecast. That doesn't necessarily mean it translates very well into the number of people you need to have. And I will tell you, one of the biggest problems I had working in this was users not being able to wrap their head around the fact that things like Erlang are not a head count. Like
Yes.
you're like some vendors call some things certain things, other vendors call it other different things. And so the terminology can get all kind of wacky. One person expects this term to mean the same thing it does over here, and it doesn't. But in general, the general concept of a head count is different than what we would consider like a full-time equivalent of workload. Full-time equivalent of workload is not a head count that you staff to, because there's all sorts of other things that happen. That's just if that person was working the whole time. So that's one of the bigger challenges we dealt with, and I dealt with many, many times, that there's just things that communication wise, people aren't wrapping their head around, like the difference between what a head count is and what potentially like what an Erlang agent is. Why you can't have, so like, depending on your environment, why you can't have you can't have 80% of calls handled in 20 seconds with when staying under 5% abandoned and also staying at a particular occupancy rate, right? Like your occupancy is highly dependent on what your abandon rates are and the patience of your callers. Because if you've got a lot of people calling in, if your folks are on other calls, then because their occupancy is really high, then you're not going to be able to keep them from abandoning if the patience is low. Or the only way you can keep them from abandoning is to just have people sitting and available, and that
And
means your occupancy goes down. And trying to communicate those trade-offs to some people is has been very difficult, especially when you've got an executive who says, "This is what I want. Give me a forecast and schedule that
yeah,
says 8% of calls in 20 seconds is less than 5% abandoned. I don't want to see anything less than 85% occupancy." And you go, your callers generally only wait around for about 30 seconds before they hang up the phone. What you just asked for is literally impossible. It's not happening
yeah,
mathematically.
I agree with you here, especially when you're talking to people that are not necessarily users, but they're the one who are releasing the budget. It gets very tricky.
Yeah.
I guess where I'm coming from is often the lack of transparency, communication, even understanding of current pool of employees on the vendor side, how their own software works. And I'll give you an example because this is something that I walked out of a call. I will admit it. I couldn't handle that. It was just like huge. No, 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 no. I'm not doing that for me. Is I got a vendor coming after me quite a lot to review their software and provide a feedback. So I ended up spending some time with them. I gave them a little bit tips and tricks. Okay, this is what a user would want to see. This is what's important for us to do our job. And then on my last call, there was I don't know the exact role, the head of product team, let's say, and one of the engineers, and they showed up and they was like, okay, we would like to ask you why does our software works in that way? And I was like confused, like I literally couldn't understand the question. So I was like, what do you mean? It's your software. Yeah, but we don't know why is it done in that way. And I was like, listen, if you're coming on a call with me and you're telling me as a head of product that an engineer, that you have no clue how your software that you're selling is using, then we shouldn't be talking anymore.
That was the engineering person, or was it an actual product person?
Product person and engineer in the team.
Oh, I mean, here, this is the reality: is that these software companies, some of them are large, some of them not so much. But you know, you can't hire every single person you hire is not necessarily going to have experience, for, especially from an engineering side, is not going to have experience in WFM, right? Engineers are engineers, and as long as they um, can do the code and they can
This,
work in the
they don't. WFM specialists, they do need to know what they're doing and they do need to know what they're communicating.
I would agree with you 100% that they should. I'm saying that they don't because that's really tough to find. It's really difficult to find. I've spent a lot of time working through engineers. It's hard to find engineers who are going to have deep WFM experience and knowledge. And when you find them, they're usually really expensive, and your budget isn't going to let you hire that person. There are some that are really good, that really know what's going on. But as organizations grow, you got to hire people into roles that may not know that type of thing. Now, the product people, you would hope, have experience with WFM, right? You hire, if you have a WFM product role, you would expect that people would know WFM pretty well. They may not need to be a super big expert to get to work through what a product role would necessarily do. But it certainly is a big benefit to having people who have a lot of WFM experience to do that. It is also the case that they're going to hire people who do not have all of that experience. You're going to find that the WFM vendors are going to hire people who might be product people, but they're not going to necessarily have a ton of WFM experience. Again, your WFM experienced people are going to be more expensive. They're going to cost more, and they may not have the budget to be able to do it. I listen. I completely agree. I think that the company should just pay it out and take the people who have all the experience, so that you can get the product you want, and you people that argue on the customer's behalf and be the voice of the customer. I completely think that that's the case. But there's a lot of decisions in corporate world that get made that are numbers on a spreadsheet, and they're not. Well,
But
that's
we're
analysis.
mixing I fully understand you, and we all start somewhere. We all need to learn. I do get that part, but for me, if you are that's the same issue that I have with solution consultants, right? If you're a solution consultant for vendor A and you are training people how to use that software, if you don't know how the software is using, how the hell are you training me? And it does happen. So I always say I want you to have workforce management experience because then you can understand my challenge, my question, and then you can translate your product knowledge and how your software works into that challenge. But if you don't have workforce management background, the least I would hope for you is understand your tool. That's the least, right? And this is the challenge for a lot of us when we say, you know what, we see the schedule that has been produced by the system, and we have the feeling that email is not prioritized. So we would like to check with you how our emails, phones, chats, and so on prioritized. How is the service level taken into account? And usually, what happens is phone takes priority. Okay, are you sure? Because it doesn't look like that based on the schedule that's produced. Yeah, we think so. And there's no one that knows that because a lot of these tools are legacy tools that are built 25 years ago. Somebody back in 25 years ago thought it's a good idea. It worked then for that market and it remained the same and it's too expensive right now to fix it. So this is why we're rolling out those new features when we're not fixing the basics.
I cannot speak to all of how the vendors work, but I can tell you that I've worked with many people with people who do know those things. They can tell you exactly how they get prioritized. They can tell you all the math that happens behind them, what the algorithm is doing, every bit of it. The people who write the algorithms and maintain them, they do know. And I've been on the phone and many times with folks explaining that to users and had users go, "Oh, okay." Things click. Like when you get somebody who can really explain it in depth and well, and go through the math and go through how the algorithm will make decisions and how and all of that stuff. And that's very, very helpful. It's usually like one person in the company though. So all your solution consultants, all of your general people doing training and support and all of that, none of them will know those answers. They might have some tangential information that might help, but they are not going to have that level of knowledge so deep inside what the application's doing. Like I said, you'll get one, maybe two people. Maybe you'll have a senior software engineer who is writing the algorithms who could explain things to you. You have potentially a really senior product person who has just been in, lived that for a really long time and can explain how all those things work. And then you've got maybe a couple other people who can speak to it pretty well, but it's not going to be the general population of any of these companies because it is way too complicated. There's so many things going into how those things work. You're just not, they're not going to be those people there. There's only going to be a number of people you can count on your hand if you're lucky.
Again, I'll give you that. WFM system as such, it's a very complicated beast. It takes the information into account from so many different places, and the more restriction we're putting into it, the more it like gets weirded out. Like, what do I do now? And it spits out some result that might be based on gazillion simulations, and you won't be able probably to provide information to that level to majority of people. Let's face it, it's too complicated. But at least some more in-depth information, I think, mm, us WFMers are kind of intelligent people, I would say, that
Absolutely.
could understand that information. For me, it's like, what do you do if that one person in that company leaves? Like, who knows how that system works? Like, no one. What do the company do then?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I assume that that's probably a case with a lot of companies where you have one person who's really, really familiar with stuff and they're kind of a linchpin where if they're pulled, um, the amount of experience and knowledge on the tool is gone with them and you can't get it back.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's a concern that probably a lot of vendors should have. I don't know how they mitigate it. I don't know. I can't say that can speak to how they mitigate those type of problems.
I
That
mean,
you should demand them. I know that you should demand to speak with the people who know. So I know that the thing is that for sure when you're engaging with one of the vendors, just demand to speak with the people who really know. Because the louder, obviously, the way that all of this works when you're a customer is the squeakier the wheel, the more attention you get. So if you
mm,
and
that,
you if you that's just the way it is, if you make a lot of noise about how you want to understand how these things work, you're not obviously they're not going to turn over proprietary information about how algorithms work or anything, but they can give you a lot more detail. But you're not going to get it through people who are frontline support. You're not going to get it through people you're not even going to get it through mainly the engineers. You're probably going to need to speak to higher level product people who've been there for a long time, something like that. Maybe engineers, depending if they're the right folks, but sometimes you need to, a lot of these companies, and it makes sense. You don't always put engineering folks on the phone with customers because engineering
yes,
people will say things that you don't necessarily want them to say.
yeah. Or will not have the most customer friendly way of
Yeah,
explaining stuff.
yeah, it's the most friendly way to explain it. It's just like, oh no, that doesn't work, right? It's like, oh well, you
Yes.
got do have to watch what you say. I mean, you are a vendor; you're trying to keep people as a customer, so you're not. You don't. You definitely are going to watch how you frame every answer, but that's natural. I wouldn't expect that any like even when you're a contact center and you got a like if you're a BPO and you got a customer, you still have to watch how you frame every conversation about how you do things because you're not going to tell them that doesn't work or that you don't care or whatever.
Okay, we're way past our usual 30-minute recording, but I do have a final question for you. Yes,
Sure.
because
We're all 30 minutes.
now I'm enjoying this conversation so much that I'm actually having thoughts of doing a second part here with you because there's just so much that we can talk about. But for this question, I want you to be honest, like very honest. Like you really have to promise to be honest because this is one thing that all of us are wondering. You know how the majority of vendors do have that kind of idea portal where if you are existing customer, you submit your wish, your idea, and then it ends up with the product, whatever it is like place. And then you get to decide, okay, can we do it? Shall we do it? When do we do it? And so on, right? That's usually how we're trained from user perspective. Just submit it and it's going to land with the product. Does it land in your bin?
So I can only speak from what I did, right? I can't again, I don't know what other companies do. I had a team meeting where me and the product managers that reported to me took an hour every single week and we looked over every single new idea that came in. We reviewed them and we tried to understand whether or not it was feasible for us to do. Because listen, trust me, you get ideas that are like, and it's not happening. You're crazy. You also get stuff that's really good, and we do look at those things, and we would review them and see the feasibility, see if we felt like we could put it in a backlog. Sometimes they're really big and it's like we'd have to do an entire strategy effort to say, we're going to do this thing where, some of the ideas span this crazy, level of a gamut of like all the way from like, hey, just automatically like fill out the number when I type 8, just fill out 8:00 in a field because it's a pain in the butt for me to have to type 8:00 to get to 8 o'clock, which
Okay.
that's a 1 day piece of effort for development, and versus, hey, look, can't you just have AI like review all the schedules over the past like 8 years and then tell me what the best schedule would be? All right. It's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll just turn that one right out, right? Um, but we reviewed those. I reviewed those in my team every single week and we put them into buckets and said, listen, we're likely to do this one. We're not likely to do that one. I tried to provide as much feedback to folks that, as I possibly could, about whether or not we really felt like we would do it or not. And it always is rough to get that feedback that we're just like, yeah, we're not going to do it. But I figure that getting the feedback that we're not going to do this is better than it just going into a pile and getting forgotten. to tell you. Now, the thing about the ideas portals is most companies are going to have like a policy, like a threshold to say you got to cross X amount of votes on this particular idea
Okay.
or like there has to be a number of duplicate ideas to say this represents a large number of the user base. One idea with one person who said that I want this. What does that mean to you? Because I've got 1,000 of those. I've got 1,000 ideas where I have one person say, this is what I want. And nobody bothered to comment on it. Nobody bothered to vote for it. Nobody bothered, that there's not even duplicate versions of it. What would make me prioritize that if one person says it? If 200 people put the same idea in, or they vote on the one idea for something, and there's tons of comments and there's tons of activity on it, and it's constantly being voted on, it's constantly being commented or same ideas constantly submitted, that those stand out big time. Oh, sorry, swipe my microphone. Those stand out big time for product people to know that that's actually something good. So again, I can't speak to everybody how all these product teams work, but if that's for us, we took that into major consideration because it's a big win. If we deliver that feature, then we can say we delivered the most popular idea out of our customer user base. And it's the best way for you to give feedback without having to necessarily get on the phone with somebody and talk.
That's great. Majority of cases, I know that when my teams go to submit ideas, usually they didn't necessarily hear anything back. So this is my question, like in what time would you provide feedback to the idea submitter? Is it like immediately? Is it in a month that you say that you have noticed it? Like,
Well, we try to do it every single week, but it depends because some of them we just leave because we go, okay, it's not a bad idea.
mm,
It doesn't have enough attention it's not a bad idea, but it's not necessarily an idea that's going to get any traction, because no other customers are asking for it. And so we'll leave it to see if it gets votes, if other people are interested in that same thing. We don't have a good way to tell, to be honest. You're looking at it and you go, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. It doesn't sound like necessarily a great idea, but like it's out there now. Is anybody else going to give it attention and say, yeah, we do. So generally speaking, once it gets enough attention, then it gets a more legitimate review. Like I'll do like a weekly or biweekly review, and we'll look at all of them and go, is this something we're going to do with something now? Or is it something that we need to just let it cook for a while and see if it garner some attention? I would recommend that your users use those ideas portals and that they're active on them. Because honestly, it's not just the ideas that we see. It's actually the people putting in the ideas, because we can look and see who's putting them in. And the people that put in the ideas, if I see you putting good idea after good idea after good idea, I start to take your specific feedback as being important.
okay, I like that tip.
Well, and I can't, that it's just the truth. You see that there are certain people that will submit great ideas all the time. And you're like, gosh, that makes so much sense. You start to realize anytime you see an idea by that person, it's going to be a good one. And you'll take it into account, even if it hasn't got as much attention, because you know that person is potentially like a consultant, or they're like a real power user that's going to say, look, I've got a good idea about anybody trying to do these exact same tasks this is something that would make their life easier.
Okay.
Oh,
And
I would definitely encourage your folks to use those as much as they can and comment on. I don't know, like I know that there's multiple companies that use specific tools, but if they have a comment system on them, engage with your other people that are on those, like have those conversations and talk to people and explain why it's actually useful. I would find as a product person, somebody would say, hey, I got an idea for something. And I would go back and comment on that idea and say, okay, I see what you're saying about the idea, but what's the actual problem you're facing? Like, what's the challenge you got? Why do you want this idea to be there? And literally 9 times out of 10, that was the end of the conversation. They'd never come back. They would never come back and say, this is the problem I'm having. This is the challenge I'm having. This is why I want this. That would be it. literally like 9 times out of 10 at least. There's barely any. They would throw the idea and go, okay, I put my idea in, I'm done. And a lot of people would come back and be like, look, I am actually interested in hearing about this idea more. And we would assume that the forum would be used, and it wouldn't. It would just go, then it would go to die, because we'd say, well, we try to reach out and ask you what more, or, ask you questions about it. And that would be it.
Now, this is a very fair point, because sometimes it's just to basically showcase yourself as someone who is being proactive. But then equally so, if you guys from vendor perspective are showing interest and there is no follow-up, then I do understand that the priority on this will kind of disappear. So that's okay. Final thing, I promise, it's just that we have so many angles, so much to talk about.
Good.
One thing that I would say, I recently worked with a vendor, and this is kind of repetitive type of a situation that I'm encountering. And it was a specific retailer, and it was a great tool, a really great tool, but it was a great tool designed for the US. It's a vendor, US based vendor. And one thing that I keep on saying to absolutely every single vendor or every single project that I'm on, we do have completely different requirements, even from a legal perspective. So you guys are very business driven in the US. In Europe, we have very employee driven legislation. So sometimes what you develop and it's great cannot be applied here without certain restrictions. And if you are a vendor who would like to take a bigger percentage of the market, there should be much more focused on how things actually need to work here. But I understand that if you're comparing size-wise, you have ideas from the US versus some ideas here, but that one or two ideas here will make for the whole market share, because we can't bend those rules. We simply can't by law. So that's one thing that it's a bit of concern for me. Luckily, the vendor that I was working with was spot on. They literally took every single thing on board and make sure the tool is compliant. But that's the thing that I'm seeing, that sometimes we try to bend the tool to use it in a way that it's not initially designed for, because we're missing those kind of requirements.
Sure. And you said it yourself. I mean, generally speaking, it's going to be if you've got to do, like, let's say you had to develop some sort of scheduling feature to adhere to labor laws. Scheduling features are big features, by the way. I don't know how familiar, like, any scheduling feature is a huge feature. Anytime you got to add anything to the scheduling algorithm, it is always going to be a ton of work, and it's going to be a ton of QA, because you can so easily break things that will cause other problems. So it's a bunch of work. So you'll do, an ROI assessment and say, like, look, we're going to invest a bunch of money in developing this new scheduling feature to help with labor laws in a particular region. Well, what's the impact? What's the market look like? How much of that pie can we actually cut off if we do that feature? And if it looks like enough, the vendor will do it. That's generally what will happen. But if it doesn't, because there's, like you said, there's potentially another feature in another market that would get more money, then that's potentially the one that gets prioritized. I would definitely say that regional specific features are important that need to be done. Obviously, things like localization, if you don't have a certain language supported, then you can absolutely lose business in this particular area. But even sometimes simpler stuff like just date formats, like it didn't support a European date format, so all my agents had a hard time reading it. Or from the forecasting side, like when you talk about what an FTE actually is. Well, I've seen a lot of these folks where, well, we consider an FTE a 40-hour work week. Well, guess what? In Europe, it might not be. It might be a 37.5-hour work week. So every calculation that you do for me now, I got to go back and adjust, which makes it a royal pain in the ass, where you should be able to say, no, I can configure what my FTE calculation actually is. So 37.5 hours is what we consider one FTE for a week or a month, especially a month. This is the other one where a monthly FTE in Europe was very much different than one in the US.
And still one of the pains that we're facing literally on the market, it's we have to bend every single toe because it's mostly designed for wiki work and not for our, especially in Eastern Europe, it's very difficult to get this right. But thank you so much, Rich. I know that I've been giving you a lot of hard time. My intention was to address all of the frustrations, all of it that we're feeling, but equally so to give you the opportunity to humanize product teams and what's happening behind the scenes and how you're working and the pressure that you guys are facing, because this is something that we're not seeing. So for me, it's always a good idea to show, okay, you know what, it might look very easy on our side, but this is what is actually happening. So thank you so much for basically be the sponge for all of my frustration.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm definitely happy to come back and talk to
Oh,
you
oh,
whenever
you
you want.
can. And trust me. Thank you so much and chat soon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Irina Mateva, founder of Right WFM, where we believe that every business and its people are unique and deserve the right solution to their challenges. If you need support with workforce management, we're just a message away. Get in touch at irina@rightwfm.com or info@rightwfm.com. If you like the content and would like to support the show, please subscribe to WFM Unfiltered on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and follow me on LinkedIn. You can also show some love to our great sponsors. For more information about them, check out the episode notes. This is your place for real WFM, so to suggest guests or topics, get in touch at irina@rightwfm.com. See ya!